I am so pleased that I can share with you the good news. I'm sure you've already seen it, but I still want to get to say it. I had a feeling it was going to happen yesterday, and it did. That the president was released from the hospital. Now, before we get into the lib reaction to this, the way the Democrats responded to it, and how insane they are, and how they are broken, they are clearly and utterly out of their minds. Let's just first look at what a normal person, a normal, decent American would think in response to this. The president is 74 years old. He is just by age in a higher risk category for COVID-19. And he's in and out of the hospital in 3 days. 3 days. And he went to the hospital, remember, as a precaution, too. I think people lose sight of that in this whole conversation. It wasn't that he was in a dire situation, but they were trying to be as careful as possible because he's the leader of the free world. Now, everyone should think this is just great news. This is objectively good news for the country. It's good news for the United States and for really, well, the whole world, at least everybody that we care about what they think. And it is. It would be really catastrophic in so many ways if the president was severely ill. First of all, he's a dad, he's a husband, he's got a wife and kids. I want every American to be safe and to beat any disease, any virus they have, whatever it is, right? And that's the underlying, that's the foundational viewpoint that we should all have when any of our fellow human beings, and especially our fellow Americans, become sick in an instance like this. Everyone who's in a hospital now, anywhere in the country, anywhere around the world with COVID, I hope they're able to beat it. And that's just the most obvious thing you can think of. But it's not the way the media responded to it. I mean, here's a senior citizen who has what can be a life-threatening disease. He is the president of the United States as well. The markets tanked when he went into the hospital. The markets jumped back up when he came out of the hospital. There's a lot right now that's on the plate of the president. Even though we're in the midst of an election season, he still has things he's got to do for the good of the country, right? We have vaccines under development that are going to need to be distributed with a lot of help from the federal government. We have all the national security threats and challenges still in the background. There's a lot here. You want a healthy president. Everyone should want a healthy president. But the lib journos, not so much. I mean, maybe they wanted him to beat this eventually. I'll give them that. Although some didn't, and that's very clear from the jokes and the comments that they've made publicly. But they wanted him to suffer for a bit. One, because they hate him in an irrational and monstrous way, but also because there's this whole narrative that they're invested in. There is a perception that the media has really built more so than any other entity in this country, more so than even the public health officials and Fauci and all the rest. The mainstream media has convinced people that COVID is horrifically dangerous to everyone. And there's a perception, and this is true from the polling, and you can see people under 50 in America think COVID is 40 times as lethal for them as it is on average. 40x, not 4. And that's because of the media. How many news stories have you seen about the spike in cases on college campuses? I think at this point, tens of thousands of college kids have gotten COVID-19. Tens of thousands of them already. It might even be more than that now. How many fatalities have there been from this? How many hospitalizations? A handful of hospitalizations. I think there might be, as I speak to you now, one fatality of a college-age person from this. And, you know, there are people who die from diseases that we don't worry about all the time, who are college age and don't make it in the news. We're talking about one in the whole nation, folks. When you're talking about a single person in an age category dying of a disease, you know, people die of West Nile virus. They die of the hantavirus, right? You're not terrified of that. Now, I understand COVID has spread to far more people. It's a much bigger problem. But for that age group, for that age cohort, it really isn't a much bigger problem than the flu. It's just not. Statistically, if you're in college, COVID's not a real threat to you. Not any more so than other diseases that we've come to live with. This is the risk management and the framework for understanding this that everyone has been told to abandon right now. And you're going to hear me talking a lot more about Sweden in the days ahead, as people yell, my mask protects you and your mask protects me. Really? Why don't you tell the Swedes that talking point? Because they're not wearing masks and they're fine. Fine. They're better off, in fact, than all of their major European counterparts right now. And what exactly was the lesson that we learned from this? Oh, well, we're not supposed to talk about that because now we have zip code by zip code lockdowns in New York. The dumbest thing I've heard, oh no, there's dumber. I can't even say in a long time. The dumbest thing I've heard in probably about less than 24 hours about COVID. That's where we are. But you see, the media also views COVID as a vessel for attacking Trump. Everyone's very upset. A lot of people have died from it. There is a real concern for people who are in the higher risk category for it. We've had economic devastation from it. People have lost their jobs. I've had friends get fired from their, let go, not fired for cause, but lost their jobs because of COVID. And we've suffered through all of this. And so there is a lot of anger out there, which you see from the protests. And there were more of them in L.A. last night, Black Bloc, BLM protests, Antifa protests. Black Bloc is the tactic. And I guess it's the right wing that's doing it, but we have all this happening in the country, and there's all this anger that's built up, and the media and the Democrat Party understands that what's most politically useful for them is for it all to be directed at President Trump. So they want people. I've been calling it for the whole summer, as you know, the Make America Miserable Again campaign. They want people angry, despondent, depressed. They want them frightened. And what happened last night was the President of the United States came out and basically delivered a roundhouse kick into the face of be afraid, be very afraid of COVID narrative. They just don't want to hear this. They don't want anyone to think that this could be a new approach going forward. The President said, I'll be leaving. This was yesterday, the great Walter Reed at 6:30 p.m., feeling good. And then he wrote, don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed under the Trump administration some really great drugs and knowledge. And then he wrote, I feel better than I did 20 years ago. What's the big problem here? Don't let it dominate your life. Don't be afraid. The media completely flipped out about this because their response is no, be terrified and let it dominate your life. In fact, let it dominate your life so much that you will acquiesce to the moronic and tyrannical demands of mostly, but not entirely, Democrat governors and Democrat politicians and officials throughout the country who are pretending like we can't see what has happened, what has worked, what hasn't. And now they're preparing to lock the country down again just in time for the election. What a surprise. I've been telling you this for the last really 6 months. As soon as we're out of lockdown, they're going to put us back into it. As soon as we get past this, they're going to decide that, oh no, right in time for the election, we have to lock down again. I mean, they're the ones that have made this an issue of theatrics. Wearing a mask is annoying. I don't enjoy it. I don't want to do it. Democrats are the ones who put masks on for their Facebook photos and their Twitter avatars. When they're alone doing interviews, they still wear a mask, even though I don't think the virus can travel over Zoom or Skype. But this has become a political symbol. This is really their primary rallying mechanism in this election cycle against Trump. You wear a mask because you have to in New York City and in other places across the country. And so it also makes it seem like because some portion of the people that do it are wearing masks in solidarity with Biden, the Democrat narrative, the more masks you see, the stronger that narrative, the stronger that support must be. And Trump just delivered a very difficult, a very challenging bit of information here for those who want us all to be in constant fear of this. Because here's a 74-year-old man who looks like he's going to entirely beat this thing in a very brief period of time with minimal symptoms. Kayleigh McEnany also tested positive. She has COVID-19. You all know she's a friend of mine now going on almost 10 years. She says she feels fine. doesn't even have any symptoms. So she's positive for COVID. She's in her 30s. I forget. I think she's about 30, 33, 34. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't know. She's a lady. I don't know if we're allowed to say her age. But she has no symptoms whatsoever as of today. So we have people who in their 20s and 30s, if they get this, the chance of them really having a problem with it is infinitesimal. But they walk around with handkerchiefs around their faces and scream at people who go for jogs by themselves outside without a mask on. They think that's rational. They think that's normal. This is a nightmare for the libs, which is why they were reacting the way they did as the president made it back to the White House and showed the country that we can beat this just like Trump is beating this. We can live our lives not in fear, but with an understanding and with a real acceptance that nothing is perfect. There are risks in life, and you need to choose which ones you're willing to take. The mandates, the national dictates about how we're going to handle this does not take into account, one, the constitutional violations that we're talking about here. Governor Cuomo is threatening to shut down places of religious worship in New York City openly. He's saying, I'll shut down your synagogue to the Jewish community in Brooklyn and Queens here. And Democrats have no problem with this. So, in some states, the weed stores are open, but the synagogues have to close. The churches have to close. That's way too dangerous. No one's really looking at science and data anymore. They're all just pushing preferred narratives on the left, and that's why the president is such a problem for them. He wasn't supposed to be able to get in and out of the hospital in 3 days and say he's feeling good. He wasn't supposed to be able to have yes, it was theatrical, and they've already released what feels like a movie trailer about Trump's return to the White House, the campaign has. But he did. And now they have to deal with it. And now they have to accept the reality of a country that's beginning to see that they don't all have to be living in fear anymore. That's really part of the vote that's coming up here. Are Democrats going to be in charge and get you to live in fear for the next year, year and a half, maybe 2 because of COVID? Or do you go with the Trump administration that's going to work through this as rationally as possible, as reasonably as possible, understanding that nothing is perfect, but we'll get through this together? This is a nightmare for the left. They may be in a situation here. Just understand this. Where Trump beats COVID, ACB gets confirmed, and then Trump beats Biden. They know this can happen, and they know they can't process or accept or handle it on any level, which is why they are panicking right now. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.